The galaxy was dying, and it had been dying for 10,000 years. Across 1,000,000 worlds, humanity clung to existence through faith, fire, and the obliteration of anything that threatened the Imperium's iron grip. In the swirling madness of the Eye of Terror, a wound in reality where the warp bled into the Immaterium, nightmares wore flesh and demons danced on the graves of civilizations. It was here, in this forsaken corner of a forsaken galaxy, that something impossibly foreign tore through dimensional barriers with the subtlety of a supernova. Beerus, god of destruction for Universe 7, opened his eyes to absolute wrongness. The ground beneath him pulsed with veins of screaming faces. The sky above writhed with colors that shouldn't exist, each hue carrying whispers of madness that scraped against his divine consciousness. Towers of bone and brass stretched toward impossible geometries, and the air itself tasted like despair, rage, pestilence, and obscene pleasure all at once. The god of destruction rose slowly, purple aura flickering around his form, as divine Hakai instinctively flared in response to this assault on reality. "What kind of backwater dimension is this?" Beerus muttered, brushing demon ichor off his Egyptian-styled attire. The last thing he remembered was surveying a distant galaxy, then a pull, violent and hungry, dragging him through layers of reality like tissue paper. Something had wanted him here, something powerful enough to reach across dimensional boundaries. That something announced itself with a roar that shattered the demon-forged mountains. From the bleeding sky descended a greater demon of corn, 30 feet of corded muscle, brass armor, and unquenchable bloodlust. Its axe could split continents. Its presence radiated such pure, distilled violence that mortal minds would simply cease functioning in proximity. The bloodthirster's eyes, burning with the reflected rage of 1,000,000,000 murdered souls, fixed on Beerus with religious intensity. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Beerus yawned. The demon's axe descended with force enough to crack a planet's crust. Beerus caught it with 2 fingers, stopping the blow as casually as one might catch a thrown pebble. The bloodthirster's eyes widened, an expression that lasted exactly as long as it took for Beerus to flick the demon's forehead. The greater demon exploded into component particles, its essence screaming back into the warp. "Rude," Beerus commented, examining his claws. "I don't even know where I am, and already the locals are trying to—" The demon reformed 20 feet away, flesh knitting from warp stuff and mortal suffering. It charged again, bellowing Khorne's name. Beerus's eyes narrowed. He raised one hand, purple energy crackling around his palm with the weight of divine authority. This was his signature technique, the power that made him feared across universes. Hakai. Destruction energy washed over the bloodthirster like a tide of erasure. Matter, energy, soul, everything that composed the demon's existence simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not killed, but unmade at the fundamental level. Where the greater demon had stood, only empty space remained. Even the warp-tainted ground had been scoured clean, leaving a perfect circle of unmarked stone. Beerus nodded, satisfied. "That's more like—" The demon reformed again, this time 50 feet away. Then again, and again. Each time Beerus erased it, the bloodthirster simply reconstructed itself from the ambient chaos energy saturating the Eye of Terror. The god of destruction's expression shifted from boredom to irritation to genuine confusion as he obliterated the same demon 17 times in as many seconds. "What is this?" Beerus demanded, preparing another Hakai. "Why won't you stay destroyed?" Laughter echoed from everywhere and nowhere, deep, rumbling amusement that carried the weight of eons. The voice that followed seemed to come from the very fabric of madness itself, and it spoke with the certainty of fundamental universal law. Because I am not bound by your rules, little god. The landscape shifted. Beerus suddenly stood in a throne room the size of star systems, and on a brass throne forged from broken weapons and crowned with skulls, sat something that made the bloodthirster look like a house pet. Khorne, the blood god, chaos personified, the eternal hunger for violence and martial glory, regarded Beerus with 8 burning eyes. You bring destruction without rage, erasure without honor, power without bloodshed. The god's voice was a billion battles occurring simultaneously. Interesting. Perhaps you would make a worthy champion or a worthy skull. Before Beerus could respond, the throne room dissolved into fractal impossibilities. Tzeentch's realm, the architect of fate's crystal labyrinth, surrounded him with infinite possible futures. Then Nurgle's garden, where disease bloomed eternal. Then Slaaneish's palace of sensation beyond mortal comprehension. Each chaos god examined him in turn, their attention pressing against his divine consciousness like stellar gravity. The god of destruction realized with dawning comprehension that these weren't mere powerful beings. They were concepts given consciousness, emotions made manifest. They existed because mortals felt rage, schemed, feared death, and sought excess. They weren't sustained by divine ki or natural law. They were sustained by the collective unconscious of every thinking being in the galaxy. And they wanted him. Fascinating, Beerus murmured, purple aura exploding around him with enough force to shatter the illusory realms. But I bow to no one. He gathered destruction energy, more than he'd used in millennia, and unleashed it in all directions. The Hakai wave expanded like a supernova of erasure, obliterating demons, demon worlds, and the very substance of the warp itself. For a moment, just a moment, he carved a sphere of absolute nothingness in the heart of chaos. The gods laughed. The erasure filled back in like water into a vacuum. Beerus's attack had worked, but the warp simply regenerated from the emotions of quadrillions of mortal souls across the galaxy. You couldn't destroy an ocean by removing a single cup of water. Time to leave, Beerus decided, and began flying in what he hoped was up. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Behind him, 4 voices spoke in unison, their words following him across dimensions. You cannot escape what exists everywhere. We will meet again, little god of destruction, and next time you will understand your place in the great game. Beerus burst through the Eye of Terror's boundary into real space, purple energy trailing behind him like a comet. Below, a world of gray stone and desperate fortifications spun in the void. A place called Cadia, though he didn't know it. A place that had already fallen, though its people fought on in death as they had in life. The god of destruction descended toward the imperial world, exhausted, confused, and for the first time in eons, genuinely concerned. He just encountered beings his Hakai couldn't permanently destroy. In this galaxy, apparently, even gods could be prey. The world Beerus descended toward was called Khazar Tyrok, one of the fortress cities built in Cadia's image after that legendary world's fall. Gray rockcrete bunkers stretched for miles, their surfaces scarred by centuries of bombardment. Gothic cathedrals rose between defensive batteries, each one doubling as a fortress, tripling as a tomb. The sky was perpetually choked with ash from industrial furnaces and the burned remains of whoever lost yesterday's battle. Beerus landed in the center of what appeared to be a military parade ground, creating a crater that sent Imperial guardsmen scrambling. Thousands of soldiers in gray uniforms and flak armor turned their laser guns toward him, bayonets fixed, prayers to the Emperor already on their lips. These were not warriors who negotiated or hesitated. They were humanity's endless tide of mortal soldiers, taught from birth that death in the Emperor's service was the highest honor. "Stand down!" A voice cut through the chaos, command authority backed by absolute certainty. An Inquisitor strode forward, power armor painted in black and red, the inquisitorial eye emblazoned on her shoulder. Her name was Heleth Vorden, and she had spent 40 years hunting demons, heretics, and Xenos across 3 sectors. Her augmetic eye glowed red as it scanned Beerus, analyzing energy signatures her tech priests couldn't classify. "Xenos or demon?" she demanded, raising a bolt pistol. "Speak or die." Beerus dusted off his shoulders, entirely unbothered by the several thousand laser guns and heavy weapons now aimed at his person. "Neither. I'm a god, not that you'd understand the difference. Now, where exactly am I? This isn't Universe 7, and I'd like directions back." The Inquisitor's expression didn't change. Claiming divinity is heresy. Only the God Emperor of mankind is worthy of worship. She turned to her retinue. A tech priest, 2 space marines in gray armor marked with demon-hunting sigils, and a sanctioned psyker whose eyes had been sewn shut. "Prepare containment protocols. This entity registers as both Xenos and warp-tainted. It may be a greater demon attempting deception." "I'm not tainted by anything," Beerus said, irritation creeping into his voice. "I was just in that nightmare dimension, fighting creatures that wouldn't stay dead. They were extremely annoying. It admits to entering the warp and surviving uncorrupted." Vorden's bolt pistol didn't waver. "Impossible for any mortal. It must be demonic in nature, despite unusual energy signatures." The 2 space marines, Grey Knights, demon hunters of the Ordo Malleus, activated their Nemesis Force weapons. Psychically attuned blades hummed with power, specifically designed to permanently kill warp entities. These warriors had fought demons that could shatter tanks with thoughts, survived possession attempts that would destroy normal men, and banished greater demons back to the Immaterium through sheer faith and skill. Brother Captain Ervax spoke through his helmet vox, voice modulated and emotionless. "Unknown entity, submit to binding or be destroyed. The Emperor's will be done." Beerus's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I don't respond well to threats." Ervax struck first, moving with transhuman speed, enhanced by psychic precognition. His blade arced toward Beerus's neck with enough force to decapitate a Carnifex. Beerus caught the sword between 2 fingers, stopping it completely. The Grey Knight's eyes widened behind his helmet. Only greater demons could halt a Nemesis blade mid-strike. "Your turn's over," Beerus said, and flicked the Space Marine. Ervax flew backward through 3 rockcrete walls, power armor screaming damage alerts. He'd survive. Space Marines were built to endure, but he wouldn't be getting up quickly. The second Grey Knight charged, bellowing litanies of banishment. Beerus sidestepped the attack with minimal effort and tapped the warrior's helmet. The Space Marine collapsed, unconscious but alive. "Merciful for a demon," Vorden observed, her mind racing through options. This entity had just casually disabled 2 of the Imperium's finest demon hunters. Standard protocols were insufficient. Tech Priest Zavar, activate the null field. The robed figure of the Adeptus Mechanicus raised a mechanical appendage, and reality itself seemed to flatten. A null field, technology designed to suppress psychic phenomena and warp manifestations, expanded across the parade ground. Demons caught in such fields would weaken, sometimes discorporating entirely. Beerus felt nothing except mild annoyance. His divine key had nothing to do with this warp these people kept mentioning. He was powered by divine authority granted by the Omni King himself, operating on entirely different universal laws. The null field might as well have been a gentle breeze. "Is that supposed to do something?" Beerus asked. "Impossible," the tech priest's mechanical voice intoned. "The null field registers active. All warp phenomena should be suppressed, unless—" His augmetic eyes whirred, processing. "Lord Inquisitor, this entity operates on unknown energy principles, not psychic in nature, not warp-derived. Potentially Xenos technology or something worse," Vorden finished. She made a decision that would later be reviewed by 3 inquisitorial conceals. "Cease fire! Stand down!" The guardsman hesitated, training warring with orders. Slowly, laser guns lowered, though fingers remained on triggers. Vorden approached Beerus carefully, bolt pistol holstered but hand near the grip. "You claim to be from another universe entirely. Not another galaxy or sector, but another reality." "Obviously," Beerus said. "Your dimension has terrible energy signatures and monsters that won't stay destroyed. I'd like to leave as soon as possible." "That may not be possible." Vorden gestured to the ash-choked sky. "You emerged from the Eye of Terror, a permanent tear in reality where the warp and Immaterium merge. If you entered through there, you've been exposed to chaos corruption, whether you realize it or not. Standard protocol demands your immediate execution." "You could try," Beerus said mildly. "But," Vorden continued, "you've displayed abilities beyond any Xenos or demon I've encountered in 40 years. You disabled 2 Grey Knights without killing them, suggesting control and possibly even restraint. Most demons kill everything in reach." She paused, making another command decision. "I'm escalating this to Lord Commander Guilliman himself. If anyone can determine what you are and whether you're a threat or a weapon, it's him." "Who?" "The returned Primarch, the Emperor's son. The avenging son who leads humanity's Indomitus crusade." Vorden's voice carried genuine reverence. "If you truly are what you claim, a being from beyond our reality, then you may be the answer to prayers we didn't know to speak." Beerus considered this. He was stuck in this bizarre dimension until he figured out how to return. These mortals seemed organized, if paranoid and heavily armed, and the mention of someone called the Emperor intrigued him. Another god? Perhaps one who understood the rules of this nightmare galaxy? "Fine," Beerus said. "Take me to your leader. But I'm hungry, and if your food is as unpleasant as your dimension, we're going to have problems." Vorden activated her Vox communicator. "This is Inquisitor Vorden, authorization Obsidian 7. I have a code Omega entity, unknown classification, requesting immediate transport to Terra. Prepare full containment protocols and notify the Lord Commander's staff." As an Arvis lighter descended to retrieve them, neither Beerus nor Vorden noticed the subtle shimmer in the air, a flicker of impossible color that marked Chaos's continued interest. Tzeentch's eyes watched through the warp, already calculating how this god of destruction fit into plans within plans within plans. The great game had a new piece on the board, and all 4 Chaos gods intended to claim it. The journey to Terra took 3 weeks of warp travel that would have driven normal humans to madness. Beerus spent most of it complaining about the food. Imperial nutrient paste, it turned out, was designed for sustenance rather than taste. Compressed proteins and vitamins that kept soldiers fighting, but did nothing for palate. The god of destruction had described it as actively offensive to the concept of cuisine and threatened to destroy the ship's galley twice. Inquisitor Vorden had quickly learned that managing Beerus was less about containment and more about distraction. She'd assigned her entire staff to researching any edible items aboard that might satisfy a divine being with standards. They'd failed. Beerus remained in a state of constant, low-grade irritation that made everyone aboard the strike cruiser extremely nervous. Now, standing in the Hall of Leng within the Imperial Palace on Terra, Beerus finally looked moderately impressed. The hall stretched for miles, its ceiling lost in shadows that no torch could penetrate. Columns the size of hive spires supported arches carved with the histories of 10,000 years of war. Every surface told a story of humanity's endless fight for survival. Xenos purged, heretics burned, worlds conquered in the Emperor's name. Gold, marble, and adamantium merged into Gothic architecture that was equal parts cathedral and fortress. At the far end, seated on a throne built from the same golden metal as the Emperor's own armor, sat Robute Guilliman, the avenging son, the returned Primarch, the Emperor's last loyal son still walking among humanity. He was massive, 9 feet of genetically perfected physiology wrapped in the armor of fate. His face was classically handsome in the way of living legends, but his eyes carried the weight of millennia and the burden of leading a dying Imperium. Beside him stood Captain General Trajan Valoris of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guardians. His golden armor was a work of art that could shrug off plasma fire, and his guardian spear crackled with power fields. Dozens of other custodians lined the hall, each one a warrior who could fight entire armies single-handedly. "Lord Guilliman," Vorden said, kneeling, "I present the entity that emerged from the Eye of Terror. Designation: unknown. Classification: unknown. Threat level: immeasurable." Guilliman studied Beerus with eyes that had commanded star-spanning military campaigns. He saw immediately what Vorden had reported. This was no demon, no Xenos, no mutant. The being before him registered on no psychic or technological scanner. It simply existed, radiating power on a wavelength that defied Imperial understanding. "You claim to be a god," Guilliman said, his voice carrying natural authority that made mortals instinctively obey. "I have fought gods. I have killed gods. I am the son of a god. So tell me, stranger from beyond our reality, what makes you divine?" Beerus's ears twitched, a subtle sign those who knew him would recognize as dangerous. "I am Beerus, god of destruction for Universe 7, appointed by Lord Zeno himself. I maintain balance by destroying planets, stars, and galaxies that have become irredeemable or useless. I am not accustomed to being questioned, and I am not accustomed to entities emerging from chaos's heart claiming diplomatic immunity." Guilliman rose from his throne, towering over normal humans but still slightly shorter than Beerus. "You entered the Eye of Terror and survived. That alone marks you as either extraordinarily powerful or extraordinarily corrupted. The Inquisitor reports you disabled 2 Grey Knights without killing them. Mercy or weakness? Neither. Boredom." Beerus examined his claws casually. "They weren't strong enough to warrant killing. Your warriors are well-trained but ultimately mortal. Not worth the effort." Captain General Valoris's hand tightened on his guardian spear. "You speak of the Emperor's custodes with disrespect. We who guard the throne are humanity's shield." "I don't care about your titles." Beerus met Valoris's gaze without flinching. "I've destroyed beings who could shatter planets with a thought. Your golden armor is pretty, but it wouldn't save you if I decided you were irritating enough to erase." The temperature in the hall dropped. Every custodian readied their weapons, prepared to die defending the Primarch. Guilliman raised one hand, stopping them. His expression remained neutral, but behind those eyes, a tactical mind refined over centuries calculated odds, outcomes, and strategies. "Threats in the Imperial Palace are considered treason," Guilliman said calmly. "The punishment is death. However, I'm willing to attribute your statement to cultural ignorance rather than genuine hostility. You're not from our reality, which means you don't understand the rules we operate under. Then explain them, Beerus said, showing the first genuine interest since arriving. Because your dimension makes no sense. I destroyed those demon creatures repeatedly, but they kept reforming. My Hakai should erase anything, matter, energy, souls, even immortals. But those things in that nightmare realm just laughed at me. Gilliman's expression shifted slightly. You attempted to destroy demons with what you call Hakai, and they reformed despite complete obliteration. 17 times for the first one. I stopped counting after that. Beerus's frustration was evident. Then 4 massive presences examined me, tried to claim me, and seemed entirely unconcerned with my power. One of them mentioned blood and skulls. Another showed me infinite futures. The third offered disease as blessing. The fourth, he paused. The fourth felt obscene. Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, Guilliman said quietly. The 4 Chaos Gods. You encountered all of them, and they let you leave. I left when I chose to leave, Beerus corrected. Though I admit they weren't concerned about my departure. They seemed to think we'd meet again. His eyes narrowed. Why would they think that? Because they exist everywhere faith, emotion, and thought exist. Guilliman gestured to a hololithic display that activated, showing the galaxy split by a massive scar. That is the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift. It tore reality apart, splitting the Immaterium in half. The warp, the dimension you call the Nightmare Realm, is bleeding into our reality more than ever before. The 4 powers are concepts given consciousness by the emotions of every living being in the galaxy. Khorne exists because mortals feel rage and wage war. Tzeentch exists because mortals scheme and seek change. Nurgle exists because mortals fear death. Slaanesh exists because mortals pursue excess and sensation. That's absurd, Beerus said flatly. Gods don't exist because of emotions. They exist because they're appointed by higher powers and maintain universal order. Perhaps in your reality. Gilliman's voice carried a weight of terrible knowledge. In ours, gods are parasites feeding on suffering, and they cannot be destroyed because they are sustained by quadrillions of mortals who continue to feel, to fear, to rage, to scheme. Kill every demon in existence, and tomorrow more will be born from the emotions of every human, Eldar, Orc, and other sentient race in the galaxy. Beerus was silent for a long moment, processing this. So, when I erased those demons, I was only destroying temporary manifestations. The actual entities exist in a dimension where thought equals reality. Correct. And your power, impressive as it may be, operates on laws of physics that don't fully apply in the Immaterium. The warp is not matter or energy. It is belief given form. You cannot destroy an idea with destruction energy, no matter how powerful. Ridiculous, Beerus muttered. But his irritation was tempered by genuine curiosity. He'd encountered a problem his Hakai couldn't solve. That hadn't happened in... he couldn't remember how long. So how do you fight them? Faith, primarily. Gilliman gestured to a custodian. Our Emperor, the master of mankind, sits on the golden throne. His psychic might illuminates the warp, creating the Astronomicon, a lighthouse that guides ships through the nightmare. His presence weakens chaos, but even he cannot destroy it. We fight through constant vigilance, through purging corruption wherever it appears, through sacrificing billions to save trillions. You sacrifice your own people? Beerus's tone carried something almost like judgment. Every day. Guillemon's expression was carved from stone. 1,000 psychers are sacrificed daily to power the Golden Throne. Billions die in war. Trillions live in conditions you would consider hellish. This is the price of survival in a galaxy where everything wants humanity extinct or enslaved. We are not good people, stranger. We are necessary people. There is a difference. Beerus studied the Primarch with new assessment. This was no mere mortal king. This was a being who understood the weight of impossible choices, who led through pragmatism rather than idealism. It was almost respectable. "Your emperor," Beerus said carefully. "Is he actually a god or just a very powerful mortal?" "Both. Neither. It depends on your definition." Guillemon's jaw tightened. He was once a man, the greatest psyker humanity ever produced. Now he sits on a throne that is part life support, part psychic amplifier, part torture device. He has not spoken clearly in 10,000 years. Some worship him as divine. Some see him as a symbol. He paused. "I see him as my father, dying slowly while keeping humanity alive through sheer will." "I'd like to meet him," Beerus said. It wasn't a request exactly, but it wasn't a demand either, merely a statement of intent from one divine being curious about another. "No," Captain General Valoris said flatly. "The Emperor is not some curiosity for Xenos entities to examine. The Sanctum Imperialis is forbidden to all but—" "It's all right, Valoris." A new voice echoed through the hall, not spoken aloud but impressed directly into every mind present. It carried the weight of ages, the exhaustion of eternal vigil, and power that made even Beerus's divine key seem small by comparison. The voice of the God Emperor of mankind. "Bring him." The Sanctum Imperialis existed at the heart of the Imperial Palace, buried beneath miles of adamantium, rockcrete, and 10,000 years of desperate fortification. The custodians led Beerus and Guillemon through passages that grew progressively more sacred and terrible, each chamber dedicated to humanity's endless war against extinction. They passed halls lined with the skulls of martyrs, chapels where tech priests maintained ancient machinery, and gates that hadn't opened in millennia. Finally, they stood before the Eternity Gate, a massive adamantium barrier taller than a titan, inscribed with words that would drive demons to madness and burn heretics to ash. It had been breached once during the Horus Heresy when the traitor Primarchs assaulted Terra. The Emperor himself had sealed it with his blood. It had never opened since. Until now. The gates swung inward with a sound like planets grinding together. Beyond lay the throne room, and within it, the Golden Throne itself. Part technology, part psychic conduit, part prison. It was a monument to humanity's desperation, built during the dark age of technology and later modified by the Emperor to cage his failing body while his psychic might keep the Immaterium alive. On the throne sat a figure simultaneously magnificent and horrifying. The Emperor's body was a withered husk, skin like parchment stretched over bones that had once been mighty. Tubes and wires pierced his flesh, feeding him the souls of psychers sacrificed to maintain his existence. The Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse, blazed from his brow with light that existed in both material and immaterial dimensions. Around him, reality itself bent. The warp and Immaterium overlapping in ways that would shatter mortal minds. But it was the Emperor's psychic presence that truly defined him. When Beerus entered the throne room, he felt for the first time since arriving in this dimension something that approached his own nature. Concentrated, refined power operating on a level beyond normal physics. Not divine key exactly, but something that transcended mortality in similar ways. The Emperor's presence pressed down on the room like atmospheric pressure. It was ancient beyond mortal comprehension, carrying the weight of humanity's entire psychic gestalt. 10,000 years of worship from quadrillions of believers had made him something approaching a true god, whether he'd wanted that or not. You feel it, don't you? The Emperor's voice resonated directly in consciousness. The fundamental wrongness of your presence here. You are not chaos, not warp spawn, not even truly alien. You are something that should not exist within the laws of this reality. Beerus approached the throne without kneeling, purple aura flickering as his own divine authority reacted to the Emperor's presence. Two gods examining each other across dimensional boundaries, each trying to understand what the other truly was. I could say the same about you, Beerus replied. You're not a god like I am, not appointed by higher authority or natural universal law. You're something constructed, made divine through belief and sacrifice rather than existing as divinity from inception. Correct. There was something almost like approval in the Emperor's tone. I was born human, became transhuman through accumulated knowledge and psychic might, and now exist as something between man and God through the faith of those who worship me against my original will. I am what this galaxy needed me to become. And yet you're dying, Beerus observed. Slowly, perhaps, but inevitably. This throne is both keeping you alive and killing you simultaneously. Yes, the irony is not lost on me. The Emperor's presence pulsed, and suddenly Beerus saw, not with eyes but with divine perception, the true nature of the Golden Throne. It was failing. The machinery was thousands of years past its designed lifespan, maintained through prayer, sacrifice, and the desperate work of tech priests who barely understood its function. When it failed completely, the Emperor would die, the Astronomicon would go dark, and humanity would be plunged into an eternal night from which it would never recover. The Chaos Gods pulled you here deliberately, the Emperor continued. They sensed your arrival at the boundary of our reality and reached across dimensions to drag you through. Do you understand why? Beerus's expression darkened. Because I'm a threat they want to neutralize or corrupt. Partially, but more than that, you are new, unprecedented, a being from beyond their influence or understanding. Tzeentch sees you as a variable that could change fates. He thought sealed. Khorne senses a warrior whose rage is not rage at all, whose destruction serves balance rather than bloodlust. Nurgle perceives your divine key as life energy that could be corrupted into eternal decay. Slaanesh feels your aesthetic preferences and wonders what excess might tempt a god who has tasted perfection. They can wonder all they want, Beerus said flatly. I'm not interested in serving them. Not serving. That is not how chaos works. The Emperor's tone carried 10,000 years of bitter experience. They do not demand worship. They offer power, solutions, fulfillment of desires you didn't know you had. They corrupt through incremental compromise, one small choice at a time, each seemingly justified until you wake up as something you never intended to become. Guilliman stood silently nearby, watching the exchange. He'd heard his father speak more in these few minutes than in all the years since his resurrection. The God Emperor was explaining, teaching, warning, treating this foreign deity not as a threat but as an equal who deserved understanding. I've existed for millions of years, Beerus said. I've faced beings who offered power, alliance, corruption. I've remained who I am because my purpose is clear. Maintain universal balance through destruction when necessary. Nothing these chaos gods offer changes that. Perhaps, but your purpose operated in a universe with different rules. Here, destruction feeds chaos. Every world you obliterate generates rage, despair, and death. that strengthens Korn and Nurgle. Every scheme to maintain balance creates patterns Tzeentch can manipulate. Your very nature as a god who destroys without malice is fascinating to beings who exist through mortal emotion. Beerus was silent, processing this. He'd never encountered a dimension where his fundamental purpose could be weaponized against him. In Universe 7, destruction was necessary and neutral. Planets that grew too corrupt or civilizations that threatened cosmic balance were simply erased. Maintaining stability. Here, that same action would feed the very entities he'd just vowed not to serve. "So what do you suggest?" Beerus asked. "I can't return to my own reality. I don't know how the Chaos Gods pulled me here, much less how to reverse it. I can't destroy them because they're sustained by emotions I can't erase. And apparently I can't even use my power without accidentally helping them. I suggest you learn, adapt. Understand that power alone is insufficient in this galaxy. You must become more than a god of destruction if you wish to survive here with your identity intact. And if I choose not to adapt, if I decide to fight on my own terms regardless of your dimension's twisted rules, then you will fall." The Emperor's certainty was absolute. Not today, perhaps not this century, but chaos is patient. It has corrupted greater beings than you, my own sons. Primarchs bred to be incorruptible fell to the ruinous powers. Entire space marine chapters, founded in my name, now serve the very entities they were created to fight. Even I, with all my foresight and power, failed to prevent the heresy that shattered my Immaterium. Beerus felt something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, but genuine concern. This Emperor wasn't threatening him or trying to control him. He was stating facts with the authority of someone who'd witnessed 10,000 years of chaos corruption and understood its mechanisms intimately. "What do you gain from helping me?" Beerus asked suspiciously. "You must have a reason for this warning." "Self-interest, primarily. You are a weapon that could tip the balance in humanity's favor if properly directed. Your Hakai, while ineffective against chaos, gods directly, could obliterate their greatest champions, destroy daemon worlds, and eliminate threats. Even my Grey Knights struggle to banish, but only if you remain uncorrupted and willing to fight." "You want to use me," Beerus said. Not accusatory, just observational. "Yes, just as I use my custodians, my Primarch, my billions of guardsmen, and my own dying body. Everything in this Immaterium is a tool in the fight for survival. The question is whether you are a tool that chooses its purpose, or one that breaks under pressure it doesn't understand." Beerus's tail swished, a sign of deep thought. "And if I refuse to be anyone's tool, then you are free to leave Terra and navigate this galaxy alone, but you will be hunted by the Inquisition as a potential demon, pursued by chaos, champions seeking to corrupt you, targeted by Xenos who will see you as either threat or resource, and isolated in a dimension where the very act of destruction feeds the enemies you wish to avoid." Guilliman finally spoke. "He's not threatening you. He's stating reality. We are not asking you to bow or worship or serve. We're offering alliance between entities who both face extinction if chaos wins. You cannot return home until we understand how you arrived. We cannot defeat chaos without weapons beyond what we currently possess. Our interests align." Beerus looked between the dying god on the throne and the warrior king beside it. He recognized pragmatism when he heard it, not friendship or loyalty, but mutual advantage. In Universe 7, he operated alone because his power was absolute. Here, power was insufficient without understanding the rules. "Fine," Beerus said. "Temporary alliance. I'll learn your dimension's rules and help fight these chaos gods. But understand this, I'm not your servant, your weapon, or your attack dog. I'm a god of destruction who happens to be temporarily stranded in your nightmare galaxy. The moment I find a way home, I'm taking it. Agreed. Guilliman will coordinate your deployment. Trust his judgment. He understands this Immaterium better than anyone living, except perhaps me and Beerus. Be careful. Chaos will come for you, now with everything it has. You have made yourself known, and the four powers do not forget potential assets. The audience was over. The Eternity Gate began to close, and Beerus was escorted from the Sanctum Imperialis. As they walked back through the palace, Guilliman spoke quietly. You handled that better than I expected. Most beings meeting the Emperor for the first time are either overwhelmed with religious awe or terrified by his power. I'm neither religious nor easily terrified, Beerus replied. Though I admit, your father is interesting, powerful in ways I didn't expect. He is dying, Guilliman said, the words heavy with millennia of grief. And when he dies, so does the Immaterium. Every day the throne fails a little more. Every day chaos grows stronger. You arrived at humanity's darkest hour, god of destruction. Whether that's coincidence or the chaos god's greatest joke remains to be seen. Beerus didn't respond, but as they exited into Terra's perpetual twilight, he looked up at the sky and saw something that chilled even his divine blood, a crack of impossible color stretching across the stars. The Great Rift, visible even from Holy Terra, a permanent scar where the warp bled into reality. Somewhere beyond that tear in space, four gods laughed and made their plans for the newest piece on their eternal game board. The first test came 3 days later in the form of a full-scale demonic incursion on the forge world of Metallica. An entire manufactorum district had been consumed by warp rifts, and Cornate demons poured through like a crimson tide. Billions of workers were already dead. The Adeptus Mechanicus had requested immediate intervention before the corruption spread to the planet's reactors. If those detonated, they'd lose a forge world that produced a fifth of the sector's armaments. Guilliman assigned Beerus to assist a strike force of Grey Knights, led by Brother Captain Urvax, the same warrior Beerus had disabled on Kasser Tyrok. The Space Marine had requested the assignment personally, wanting to observe this foreign entity in actual combat against chaos. The Thunderhawk gunship descended through Metallica's polluted atmosphere, its hull scoring with heat. Through the viewport, Beerus saw a world that was more factory than planet. Continent-sized forges belching smoke, hive cities built around production lines, and now, spreading like a cancer, regions where reality itself had torn open to reveal the warp beneath. Our objective is the Central Rift, Urvax explained through his helmet vox, his tone professional despite their previous encounter. Seal it, and the lesser breaches will collapse. The problem is a bloodthirster, the same class of greater demon you encountered in the Eye of Terror, is maintaining the breach. It must be banished. I'll just destroy it, Beerus said, examining the tactical display without much interest. You tried that before. The demon reformed. Urvax's tone carried no accusation, just tactical assessment. Grey Knights banish demons by combining psychic power with absolute faith in the Emperor. We force their essence back into the warp and seal it there temporarily, but even we cannot permanently destroy them. They always return eventually. Then your method is inefficient, Beerus observed. What's the point of winning a battle if your enemy just comes back? Because eventually might be centuries or millennia. In that time, billions of humans live who would otherwise die. We fight knowing victory is temporary because temporary victory is all the Immaterium has ever had. Urvax's words carried the weight of 4 centuries fighting demons. Welcome to the long war, god of destruction. There are no permanent solutions here. The Thunderhawk's assault ramp dropped, and they descended into hell. The Manufactorum had transformed into something from nightmares. Assembly lines ran with blood instead of oil, machinery twisted into screaming faces. The workers, those still alive, had been reshaped by chaos into something that was no longer quite human, their bodies mutated into living weapons. And everywhere demons capered and slaughtered with religious ecstasy. Bloodletters, lesser demons of Khorne, charged the moment the Grey Knights deployed. Each demon stood 8 feet tall, muscles like braided steel cables, wielding swords that burned with warp flame. A single bloodletter could tear through a tank. There were hundreds of them. The Grey Knights met them with bolt rounds, psychic fire, and absolute faith. Each Space Marine was worth 100 normal warriors. Their nemesis weapons carving through demon flesh, while their prayers created zones of sanctity that weakened warp manifestations. But for every demon banished, 2 more emerged from the central rift. Beerus floated above the carnage, watching with analytical detachment. This was a war of attrition, and the Immaterium was losing despite the Grey Knights' skill. The daemons would keep coming until the rift closed, and the rift wouldn't close while the Bloodthirster maintained it. Enough of this, Beerus muttered and descended. He moved through the battlefield like a purple comet, each casual gesture obliterating demons. A flick of his finger erased a bloodletter. A wave of his hand deleted a dozen more. Where Grey Knights fought with technique and faith, Beerus simply unmade reality around him. Hakai energy pulsed in waves, and demons disappeared as though they'd never existed. But just as before, they reformed. Pulled back from the warp by the emotions of dying workers and enraged tech priests, the demons reconstructed themselves from ambient chaos energy. Beerus had cleared a 100-yard radius around himself, but at the edges, demons were already manifesting again. "You see the problem," Urvax said through the Vox, fighting beside his battle brothers. "Destruction is insufficient. We must address the source." Beerus's eyes narrowed, frustration mounting. In Universe 7, when he destroyed something, it stayed destroyed. The finality of his Hakai was absolute. Here, his signature technique was reduced to a temporary inconvenience. It was insulting. The Bloodthirster emerged from the central rift as though sensing his anger. This was no mere manifestation. This was a true greater demon of Khorne, one of the Blood God's chosen champions. Its wings spread wide enough to shadow city blocks. Its axe, forged in the fires of Khorne's brass citadel, had tasted the blood of saints and primarchs. When it roared, the sound shattered steel and drove mortal men to madness. "Skull for the Skull Throne! The Blood God sends his regards, false deity!" Beerus met its charge head-on. The impact created a shockwave that leveled everything within a quarter mile. The Bloodthirster swung its axe with strength that could cleave mountains. Beerus caught the blade with one hand, his divine key flaring purple against the demon's warp flame. They stood locked for a moment, god versus demon, neither giving ground. "You're stronger than the last one," Beerus admitted. "But strength alone isn't enough." He channeled Hakai directly into the demon's essence, destruction energy flowing through the point of contact. The Bloodthirster's form began to disintegrate, screaming Khorne's name as it was unmade atom by atom. Within seconds, nothing remained except the echo of its death scream. Beerus turned toward the rift, ready to seal it through pure force. The Bloodthirster reformed inside the rift, laughing. "The Blood God's domain is eternal. You cannot kill what exists beyond death." "Beerus," Urvax's voice cut through the Vox, "stop trying to destroy it. We need to banish it properly, force it back through the rift, and seal the breach before it can return." Beerus's pride warred with pragmatism. accept that his Hakai was insufficient, or continue fighting a battle he couldn't win through strength alone. For a god of destruction accustomed to absolute power, it was a humbling decision. He made it anyway. Fine. What do you need? Hold it in place. Keep it from retreating deeper into the warp. My brothers and I will perform the rite of banishment. Urvax was already coordinating with his squad, Grey Knights forming a ritual circle around the rift. Beerus engaged the Bloodthirster again, this time focusing on containment rather than destruction. He moved with speed that made transhuman reflexes look slow, landing blows that kept the demon off balance without trying to erase it. It was frustrating, unsatisfying work, like fighting with one hand tied behind his back. But it worked. The Grey Knights chanted in High Gothic, their combined psychic might creating a zone of sanctity that pushed against the warp. The rift began to shrink. Reality reasserting itself. The Bloodthirster felt it and tried to flee back into Chaos's embrace, but Beerus grabbed it by the wing and held it in place. Heretic! Daemon! False god! The demon thrashed, but even Khorne's strength couldn't overcome Beerus's grip. I'm none of those things, Beerus said calmly, but I'm starting to understand your dimension's rules. You exist because of belief and emotion, so let me show you something that exists beyond both. He poured divine Kai, not Hakai, but pure god energy, into the demon's form. Not to destroy, but to push, to force it back across the boundary between Immaterium and warp. The Bloodthirster's essence compressed, squeezed through the shrinking rift like paste through a tube. With a final psychic crescendo, the Grey Knights sealed the breach. Reality snapped back into place, leaving only scorched metal and the corpses of thousands. The Bloodthirster was gone, banished back to Khorne's realm, where it would need decades or centuries to reform enough to return. Temporary victory, the best the Imperium could hope for. Urvax approached Beerus, removing his helmet. His face was scarred from centuries of demon fighting, but his eyes held something approaching respect. You adapted. Good. Many beings of power refuse to change their methods even when facing inevitable failure. You learned in one battle what takes some warriors lifetimes to accept. I didn't like it, Beerus said flatly. In my universe, destroyed means destroyed. Permanently. This dimension's rules are annoying. Yes, Urvax agreed, but they're the only rules we have. Welcome to the Long War, Beerus, where victory is temporary. Defeat is always one mistake away, and every battle is the same war we've been fighting for 10,000 years. As the Thunderhawk retrieved them, Beerus looked back at the sealed rift. Somewhere in the warp, Khorne watched and learned. The Blood God had tested Beerus's power and found it wanting, not in strength, but in application. The god of destruction could erase anything, but erasure meant nothing against beings that existed beyond mortality. The first lesson of Warhammer 40k had been taught. Beerus had learned it, but he didn't have to like it. The whispers began 3 weeks after Metallica. Beerus first noticed them during a briefing on Terra. Subtle voices at the edge of perception, speaking in languages he didn't know but somehow understood. They offered knowledge, showed him visions of how his Hakai could be improved to permanently destroy demons if only he accepted a small gift from the Great Schemer. The voices came with images of infinite libraries, repositories of knowledge spanning all possible realities. Xehanort, the architect of fate, had begun his play. You're being targeted, said Inquisitor Vorden when Beerus mentioned the whispers. They stood in her personal chapel aboard the strike cruiser, absolute conviction, surrounded by wards and purity seals. Tzeentch corrupts through curiosity and the promise of knowledge. He'll show you solutions to problems you didn't know you had, offer power that seems perfectly reasonable, until one day you realize you've become his puppet. "I'm not so easily manipulated," Beerus said. But even as he spoke, another whisper showed him a vision, a technique that would let his Hakai affect warp space directly. All it would cost was understanding certain forbidden truths. Everyone thinks that. Vorden activated a hololithic display showing a space marine in ornate blue armor. "This is Azek Ahriman, chief librarian of the Thousand Suns. Once he served the Emperor as a loyal space marine and powerful psyker." Tzientch whispered to him about how to save his brothers from mutation. Ahriman believed he could use chaos as a tool without becoming its servant. Now he's the changer of ways' greatest mortal champion, having damned his entire legion to exist as dust inside their armor. Beerus studied the image. He looks aware, not mindlessly corrupted. That's what makes Tzientch dangerous. His corruption doesn't turn you into a raving lunatic like Khorne's rage or a disease-ridden monster like Nurgle's plagues. It leaves your mind intact, even enhanced. You become smarter, more capable, more powerful, and you serve him completely while believing you're still in control. Vorden's augmetic eye whirred, scanning Beerus for signs of taint. The whispers will continue. They'll offer solutions tailored specifically to your frustrations. Can you resist? "I've resisted worse," Beerus said. But uncertainty gnawed at him. In Universe 7, temptation was simple. Someone stronger challenged him, someone weaker annoyed him, and he responded with destruction or dismissal. Here, the threats were subtle, operating on psychological levels he wasn't accustomed to defending against. The test came during their next deployment, a Space Hulk investigation near the Cadian Gates ruins. Space Hulks were nightmares of the void, massive conglomerations of ships fused together by warp exposure, drifting through real space like floating tombs. This one, designated Harbinger of Truths, contained something the Mechanicus desperately wanted, a suspected STC fragment, holy technology from humanity's lost golden age. If recovered, it could provide manufacturing templates for weapons, medicine, or infrastructure humanity had forgotten how to build. The problem was that Space Hulks were never unoccupied. Genestealers bred in them. Orcs used them as asteroid fortresses. And sometimes Chaos claimed them as demon-infested temples. Beerus accompanied a combined force of Grey Knights and Thousand Suns renegades. No, wait. He blinked, and the vision corrected itself. Not Thousand Suns. Death Watch, the elite Xenos hunting space marines drawn from multiple chapters. The whispers had tried to make him see allies as enemies. "Focus," said Brother Sergeant Artemis of the Death Watch, his voice sharp. "The Space Hulk's warp signature is increasing. Something inside is aware of our presence." They boarded through a breach in the hull, entering corridors that defied geometry. Hallways stretched longer than the ship's external dimensions. Rooms existed at impossible angles. The warp had touched this place and left its mark. Reality here was negotiable. As they advanced toward the STC fragment's location, the whispers intensified. Tzientch spoke directly now, his voice like crystallized ambition and infinite possibility. "You seek answers, little god. Why you were brought here, how to return home. I offer you knowledge. The warp can be navigated if one understands its currents. I can show you the way back to Universe 7 for the small price of understanding." "What kind of understanding?" Beerus asked aloud, making the Space Marines tense. "Do not engage with it," Artemis barked. "Tzientch's lies are wrapped in truth. Whatever he offers, the price is your soul." But the vision came anyway. Beerus saw himself standing before a portal, a tier between dimensions. He saw Universe 7 on the other side, saw Whis and Earth and everything familiar. All he needed was to accept Tzientch's gift of dimensional comprehension. Such a small thing. Such a reasonable exchange. It's showing me the way home, Beerus said, his voice distant. Why would you offer that? Because your presence here disrupts fates I have not yet calculated. You are a variable outside the great game. But if you serve me, you become part of my design. If you leave, the board returns to known configurations. Either outcome serves my purpose. And if I refuse both? Beerus's eyes narrowed, fighting through the psychic pressure. If I stay but don't serve, then you suffer. You fight wars you cannot win, watch your temporary allies die permanently, and face the inevitable corruption of Khorne, Nurgle, or Slaanesh. Eventually, one of us claims you. That is the only certainty in this galaxy. The Space Hulk's walls melted into pure warp stuff. Suddenly they stood in Tzeentch's crystal labyrinth, the same impossible realm Beerus had briefly glimpsed in the Eye of Terror. Paths of crystallized possibility stretched in every direction, each one showing a different future. One path showed Beerus serving Tzeentch willingly, using enhanced Hakai to reshape reality itself. Another showed him falling to Khorne, becoming a demon prince of destruction and bloodshed. A third showed him corrupted by Nurgle, accepting entropy as the ultimate form of destruction. The fourth showed him claimed by Slaanesh, seeking ever greater sensations to satisfy divine boredom. And one path, the narrowest, most fragile path, showed him resisting all four, but alone, hunted, and slowly ground down by the galaxy's endless horror until he was either killed or broken. Choose, little god, serve and gain purpose, leave and abandon this galaxy to its fate, or resist and suffer, inevitably. Beerus stood at the center of infinite paths, feeling the weight of genuine uncertainty for the first time in eons. Every option led to corruption or loss. There was no victory condition, no clean solution, no path that preserved both his freedom and his identity. Then he remembered something the Emperor had said. Everything in this Imperium is a tool in the fight for survival. Tools could break. Tools could be discarded. But tools that chose their purpose had power beyond simple function. I choose none of your paths, Beerus said, and his purple aura exploded with divine authority. I'm not part of your game, Tzeentch. I'm not a piece on your board or a variable in your equations. I'm a god of destruction who destroys problems, not serves them. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn everything about this dimension, understand its rules completely, and then I'm going to find a way to hurt you. Really hurt you. Not just temporarily banish your demons, but strike at whatever conceptual existence lets you whisper in people's minds. The crystal labyrinth shook. For just a moment, Beerus felt surprise from the Chaos God, genuine, unscripted surprise that someone had rejected all options and proposed creating a new one. Impossible. You cannot threaten concepts. I am change itself. Then I'll destroy change, Beerus said flatly. Or at least the parts of change that include you. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure it out. Because that's what gods of my caliber do when faced with problems we can't immediately solve. We learn, we adapt, and then we obliterate the obstacle. He gathered divine ki and punched reality itself, shattering the crystal labyrinth like glass. The vision broke, and suddenly they were back on the Space Hulk, the Death Watch staring at Beerus with weapons raised. Stand down, Beerus said tiredly. I refused him. It was unpleasant. Brother Sergeant Artemis lowered his bolter slowly. You were in a trance for 3 minutes. We thought we'd lost you to the warp. What did you see? Futures, lies, and a god who thinks he's clever. Beerus's tail swished irritably. Let's get your technology fragment and leave. This place annoys me. They retrieved the STC fragment, a data core containing manufacturing protocols for a pattern of lasgun more efficient than current Imperial models. Small compared to the galaxy's needs, but in the Imperium, every advantage mattered. As they evacuated the space hulk, Beerus felt Tzeentch's attention withdraw, replaced by something almost like respect. The Architect of Fate had tested the God of Destruction's mind and found it more resilient than expected. But the game had only begun, and Tzeentch had infinite patience for long schemes. Back aboard the Absolute Conviction, Inquisitor Vorden performed a ritual examination for Chaos Taint. Her instruments detected nothing, but her experience told her something had changed. "You resisted," she said. "Truly resisted, not just delayed corruption. That's rare." "I'm not easily manipulated," Beerus repeated. This time he believed it more. "But he'll try again, won't he?" "All four will. Khorne tested your strength. Tzeentch tested your mind. Nurgle will test your endurance. And Slaanesh," Vorden paused. "Slaanesh will test your desires. Whatever you want most in this galaxy, the Dark Prince will offer it in exchange for servitude masked as indulgence." Beerus considered this. What did he want? To return home, obviously. But failing that, he wanted good food, comfortable rest, and perhaps respect. Recognition that he was a god, not just another powerful entity to be weaponized. Slaanesh would offer all of that, and it would cost him everything. "I'll face that when it comes," Beerus said. "For now, I need to learn more about fighting chaos without feeding it." "Is there anyone who understands how to hurt these gods without empowering them?" Vorden smiled grimly. "There's one place, the Grey Knight's Fortress Monastery on Titan, Saturn's moon. They've spent 10,000 years studying demon slaying. If anyone can teach you to weaponize destruction against chaos without corruption, it's them." "Then that's where we go next," Beerus decided. As the ship entered the warp for transit, reality flickered and distant laughter echoed from four distinct sources. The Chaos Gods had issued their challenges. Beerus had answered with defiance rather than strength. The Great Game had acknowledged a new player, one who refused to play by the rules. Titan was a moon wrapped in psychic wards, so powerful they made reality itself uncomfortable. As Beerus's shuttle descended toward the Grey Knight's Fortress Monastery, he felt layers of protection designed to keep the warp at bay. Not just physical defenses, but conceptual barriers that said demons cannot exist here with enough authority that the universe agreed. The fortress itself was a monument to humanity's war against chaos. Massive adamantium walls inscribed with 10,000 years of names of fallen knights, cathedral spires that doubled as weapons platforms, and at its heart, chambers where the most dangerous knowledge in the Imperium was carefully preserved. This was where Space Marines came when they needed to understand their enemy so thoroughly they could banish it with prayer and blade alone. Supreme Grandmaster Kaldor Drago met Beerus in the Chamber of Trials, a vast room whose walls were covered in demon true names, banishment rites, and warnings written in the blood of martyrs. Drago was a legend even among the Grey Knights, a warrior who had survived centuries trapped in the warp itself, fighting demons in their home realm and somehow remaining pure. His armor bore scars that no earthly weapon could inflict. His eyes carried the weight of horrors that would break normal men. But when he looked at Beerus, there was no fear, only assessment. "The foreign god," Drago said, his voice like gravel. "The Emperor himself sent word that you should be trained in our methods. That is unprecedented. We do not teach outsiders the art of demon slaying. Our knowledge is sacred, dangerous, and corrupting if misunderstood." "Then make sure I understand it correctly," Beerus replied, "because I'm tired of fighting enemies that won't stay dead." Drago studied him for a long moment. Very well, but understand, what I teach you will change you. Our methods require absolute faith, unwavering will, and the acceptance that you fight an enemy that exists in minds as much as in matter. Can a god of destruction embrace these principles? I've existed for millions of years. I've adapted to countless situations. I can learn whatever you teach. We shall see. Drago gestured, and a psychic ward activated, sealing the chamber. Lesson 1. Demons are not creatures. They are emotions given form, fragments of their patron gods, reflections of mortal sin. When you fight a bloodletter, you're not fighting a soldier. You're fighting humanity's collective rage. When you face a plague bearer, you battle every mortal's fear of death and disease. Understanding this is crucial. I understand that, Beerus said impatiently. The Emperor explained, You understand intellectually, not instinctively. Drago raised his hand, and suddenly the air shimmered. A lesser demon materialized, not a real one, but a psychic construct created by Drago's mind, a training simulation made tangible through psychic mastery. It lunged at Beerus with shrieking fury. Beerus instinctively raised his hand, Hakai energy forming. Drago waved, and the demon vanished before Beerus could strike. Wrong, Drago said. You tried to destroy matter. But this demon was never matter, it was thought. Your Hakai erased the psychic construct, yes. But if it had been a real demon, you would have only scattered its essence. Try again. This time don't destroy, deny. The demon appeared again. Beerus hesitated, fighting his instinct to obliterate threats. Instead, he focused on the demon's nature. It was rage, violence, bloodlust. He reached out with his divine consciousness and simply rejected those concepts, refused to acknowledge their validity in his presence. The demon flickered and weakened, but didn't vanish. Better, Drago said, but incomplete. Denial alone is insufficient. You must replace the demon's existence with something stronger: faith, certainty, purpose. For Grey Knights, that certainty comes from the Emperor. We believe so absolutely in his protection that demons cannot exist near us. For you, you must find what you believe in with equal conviction. Beerus frowned. I believe in my role as God of Destruction, in maintaining universal balance through necessary obliteration. Does that belief function here, where destruction feeds chaos and balance is a myth? Drago's question cut deep. You must find new certainty, or your resistance will eventually fail. Over the next weeks, Drago put Beerus through trials designed to break space marines. He faced psychic constructs of all 4 Chaos Gods demons, each one testing different vulnerabilities. Cornate demons tested his restraint. Could he fight without rage? Nurglite plagues tested his vitality. Could he resist corruption that offered rest from endless vigilance? Slaaneshi horrors tested his discipline. Could he deny temptation when offered perfection? And Xingqian manipulators tested his certainty. Could he trust his own decisions when shown infinite alternatives? Each trial pushed Beerus toward corruption in subtle ways, and each time he had to find reasons to resist that went beyond simple strength. During one session, facing a psychic construct of a great unclean one, Nurgle's greatest demons, Beerus felt the insidious whisper of despair. Why fight forever? Why not accept entropy, the ultimate form of destruction? All things end anyway. Why not hasten it peacefully? Because, Beerus said through gritted teeth, purple aura flaring, I decide what ends and when. Not entropy, not decay, not some chaos god's plan. Me. That's what makes me a god of destruction instead of a slave to destruction. The construct dissolved, and Drago nodded with something approaching approval. You're learning. Slower than I'd like, but learning nonetheless. The Grand Master deactivated the psychic wards. But theoretical training is insufficient. You need real combat experience applying these principles, and I know exactly where to send you. He activated a hololithic display showing a demon world deep in the Eye of Terror, a planet called Vol, where Nurgle's garden had taken root in real space. Plagues that could kill worlds cultivated there. Greater demons tested new diseases on enslaved populations. And at its heart, a demon prince named Morbidax, the Eternal, plotted a plague that would spread through the Immaterium like wildfire, killing trillions before anyone realized they were infected. The Immaterium has tried 3 times to destroy Vol. Each time the assault failed. Demons simply reform. Plagues corrupt our warriors, and Nurgle's garden grows stronger from our deaths. Drago's expression was carved from stone. But you're not Imperial. You're not vulnerable to disease in the same way. And if you can apply what I've taught you, deny the demons' existence through absolute conviction rather than trying to destroy them, you might succeed where we've failed. You want me to assault a demon world alone? Beerus asked. No, I'm coming with you, along with a brotherhood of Grey Knights. But you'll lead the assault. Consider it your final examination. Drago's eyes gleamed. Succeed, and you'll have proven you can fight chaos without feeding it. Fail, and Nurgle claims another trophy for his garden. Beerus's tail swished, anticipation rather than concern. Finally, a real challenge with clear parameters. Destroy the demon prince, deny the demons, cleanse the world without feeding chaos through destruction. Simple in concept, nightmarishly difficult in execution. When do we leave? Immediately. Vol is already killing nearby systems through plague vectors. Every day we delay, millions die. Drago turned toward the armory. Prepare yourself, God of Destruction. You're about to face Nurgle's domain directly. The Plague Lord is patient, insidious, and he's already noticed your resistance to the other gods. He'll offer you something far more dangerous than power or knowledge. What's that? Acceptance, rest, an end to struggling against inevitable entropy. Drago's voice carried the weight of someone who'd faced that temptation personally. He'll offer to let you stop fighting. And after everything you've endured in this galaxy, that will be the hardest offer to refuse. As they boarded the strike cruiser for transit to the Eye of Terror, Beerus felt 3 presences watching from the warp: Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, all waiting to see if Nurgle would succeed where they'd failed. The God of Destruction had resisted strength, cunning, and temptation. Now he'd face despair. Vol stank of death, even from orbit. The demon world spun lazily in the Eye of Terror's madness, its surface a festering wound of rot, disease, and obscene life. Nurgle's garden had transformed what was once an imperial agri-world into a living testament to decay. Forests of diseased flesh trees, oceans of pus and bile, cities built from festering corpses that still screamed. Even looking at it through the strike cruiser's viewports made mortal crew members vomit. Beerus felt nothing except disgust and determination. He'd trained for weeks under Drago's brutal regimen, learning to fight chaos with denial rather than destruction. Now came the test. Our insertion point is here, Drago indicated on the tactical display, pointing to a cathedral of rot where Demon Prince Morbidax cultivated his ultimate plague. The structure exists partially in real space, partially in the warp. Conventional bombardment won't reach it. We must assault directly, fight through Nurglite demons, and banish Morbidax before he completes his work. And if he's already completed it, asked Brother Castellan Garan, leader of the Grey Knights Brotherhood assigned to this mission. Then we pray the Emperor has mercy on the trillions who will die screaming. Drago's tone left no room for that outcome. We strike hard, strike fast, and accept no compromise. The Plague Lord will offer every warrior here a chance to stop fighting, to rest, to accept decay. Anyone who falters damns us all. The Grey Knights nodded, their faith absolute. Beerus simply flexed his claws, purple aura flickering. He'd faced gods, angels, and destroyers across universes. One more corrupted deity wouldn't break him. They deployed via Thunderhawk directly into Vol's diseased atmosphere. The gunship's hull immediately began corroding, blessed adamantium succumbing to plagues that ate metal as easily as flesh. They had minutes before the craft disintegrated. The assault ramp dropped and they descended into Nurgle's embrace. The Cathedral of Rot was exactly as horrible as imagined. Walls made of living tumors, floors of diseased flesh that squelched underfoot, air thick with spores that would kill normal humans in seconds. Plague bearers shambled from every shadow, Nurgle's tallymen counting diseases with cheerful enthusiasm. Each demon wielded a plague sword that carried 7 plagues, any one of which could kill armies. The Grey Knights engaged immediately, their nemesis weapons carving through demon flesh, while their prayers created zones of purity. Beerus moved among them like a purple comet, applying Drago's lessons. He didn't destroy the demons, he denied them. Each time a plague bearer approached, Beerus rejected its existence with absolute conviction. You are disease. I am a god. Disease doesn't affect gods. Therefore, you cannot exist near me. The demons flickered and weakened, their forms unstable in the face of such certainty. They didn't die, but they couldn't manifest fully either, caught in a state of existence where belief said they shouldn't be there. It was exhausting in ways pure destruction never was. Each denial required concentration, will, and the maintenance of absolute faith in his divine status. But it worked. The diamonds couldn't reform as quickly because Beerus wasn't destroying them. He was making the universe agree they shouldn't exist in his presence. They fought through corridors of plague and chambers of rot, each step bringing them closer to the cathedral's heart. Nurglite demons fell back, not banished, but denied, unable to maintain manifestation against Beerus's conviction. The Grey Knights took advantage, pressing forward with bolt and blade. Then they reached the central chamber, and Beerus finally understood Nurgle's true horror. The demon prince Morbidax was vast, 3 stories tall, its body a mountain of tumors, open sores, and crawling maggots. But it smiled with grandfatherly warmth, and when it spoke, its voice carried genuine affection. "Welcome, little godling. I've been waiting for you." Morbidax gestured to the chamber's walls, which pulsed with captured souls, thousands of Imperial citizens, frozen in the moment before death, preserved in rot for eternity. "See what I offer. No more pain, no more struggling, just acceptance, peace, and the comfort of inevitability." "Your comfort is corruption," Drago snarled, advancing with his nemesis sword blazing. "We've come to banish you, demon." "Banish me?" Morbidax laughed, a sound like bubbling pus. "I am already banished, knight. This entire world is my banishment, cast out from Nurgle's true garden into this pale imitation. Yet I am content. That is grandfather's gift, acceptance of whatever existence provides." The demon prince turned its attention fully to Beerus. "You, though, you're new to suffering, new to this galaxy's endless war. How long have you fought since arriving? Weeks, months. Already you're exhausted from denying what you are. You destroy, little god. That's your nature. Yet here you are, constraining yourself, denying your purpose, fighting in ways that feel wrong. For what? To protect mortals who will die anyway? To serve an emperor who sees you as a weapon? Why not rest?" Beerus felt the weight of those words. He was tired, not physically. Gods didn't experience physical exhaustion, but tired of fighting by rules that went against his nature, tired of victories that were only temporary, tired of a galaxy where nothing he did mattered permanently. "I can feel your weariness," Morbidax continued, its voice gentle as a lullaby. "Grandfather Nurgle offers rest, not death, not corruption as you understand it, but acceptance. Stop fighting what you are. Embrace destruction without restraint. Let entropy take its course, and find peace in the inevitable end of all things. Isn't that what a god of destruction should want?" For a moment, just a moment, it sounded reasonable. Beerus was fighting against his nature, trying to fit into a dimension whose rules violated everything he understood about purpose and power. Why struggle? Why not accept that entropy was just another form of destruction and let it take its course? Then he remembered something Whis had once said back in Universe 7. The difference between a god of destruction and a force of entropy is choice. You choose what ends. That's what makes you divine rather than simply destructive. Choice, agency, the ability to decide rather than simply accept. "I'm not tired of fighting," Beerus said, his voice growing stronger. "I'm annoyed by your dimension's rules. There's a difference. Tired beings want rest. Annoyed beings find solutions." His purple aura exploded outward, divine Kai pushing back the miasma of plague. "You offer acceptance. I offer this. I reject your rejection. I am a god of destruction who chooses what to destroy and when. You're just entropy wearing a friendly face." He advanced toward Morbidax and, for the first time, applied both aspects of his training, denial and destruction working in concert. He denied the demon's plagues while destroying its physical manifestation. He rejected the concept of inevitable decay while erasing the matter that hosted it. Morbidax's smile faltered. "Impossible. You cannot simultaneously destroy and deny." "Watch me." Beerus's hands glowed with purple Hakai energy infused with absolute conviction. "I deny that decay is inevitable. I destroy the vessel that hosts your consciousness. I reject your philosophy while erasing your form, and I do it all because I choose to, not because I'm bound by your rules or mine." He struck Morbidax with everything he'd learned. Grey Knight discipline merged with Destroyer's power, faith in his own divine nature, channeled through technique designed to banish demons. The demon prince's form erupted in purple light, its essence scattered not just to the warp, but denied permission to reform quickly. The cathedral shook as Morbidax was forced back into Nurgle's garden proper, banished not for decades, but potentially centuries. The souls trapped in the walls suddenly crumbled to ash, released from their preservation, finally allowed to die properly. "Grandfather will remember this," Morbidax's voice echoed as it was pulled away. "You cannot deny entropy forever, little god." "No," Beerus agreed, breathing hard from the effort. "But I can deny it today, and tomorrow, and every day after that until either I find a way home or this galaxy ends. That's what gods do. We fight impossible odds because we're too stubborn to accept inevitability." The cathedral began collapsing, its structure sustained by Morbidax's presence. Drago grabbed Beerus's shoulder. "Time to leave. The entire demon world will destabilize without its prince." They ran through corridors that were already rotting away completely, plagues dying without their source, demons discorporating as reality reasserted itself. The Thunderhawk, barely held together by the tech priest's prayers, extracted them as Vol began tearing itself apart below. From orbit, they watched the demon world collapse into the warp, its temporary foothold in real space destroyed. Billions of plague vectors died with it. Morbidax's ultimate disease would never spread. Trillions of Imperial citizens would live who otherwise would have died screaming. Temporary victory. But in the Imperium, temporary was all anyone got. Drago removed his helmet, his scarred face showing rare approval. You passed the test. You fought chaos using our methods while maintaining your own nature. That's impressive for an outsider. I had good teachers, Beerus admitted, though I still prefer just destroying things. This denial approach is exhausting. Yes, but necessary when facing enemies that feed on pure destruction. Drago looked out at the Eye of Terror, where 3 more Chaos Gods waited with their own plans. You've resisted Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle. That leaves only Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, the God of Excess. And I promise you, what the others offered will seem simple compared to what Slaanesh will show you. Beerus's expression hardened. Let them try. I've come this far. One more test won't break me. But as the strike cruiser entered the warp for the journey back to Terra, Beerus felt a presence unlike the others, seductive, promising, and already whispering about desires he hadn't known he had. Slaanesh didn't offer power, knowledge, or rest. The Dark Prince offered perfection, and for a god who'd existed for millions of years, the promise of something truly new was the most dangerous temptation of all. Slaanesh came not with armies, but with an invitation. It arrived while Beerus rested in his quarters aboard the Absolute Conviction, delivered by no messenger but simply appearing in his mind like a thought that had always been there. The invitation was exquisitely crafted, not threatening or ominous, but genuinely appealing. A feast beyond any in existence, foods from 1 billion worlds prepared by chefs whose skill bordered on sorcery, entertainment that would satisfy even divine standards. All he had to do was accept. Don't, Inquisitor Vorden said when Beerus mentioned it. They stood in her sanctum, surrounded by purity seals and anti-demonic wards. Slaanesh is the most insidious of the 4. The others offer power or solutions. The Dark Prince offers you what you actually want. Packaged so perfectly you won't notice the corruption until it's consumed you completely. It's just food, Beerus said, but even he heard the weakness in his argument. I've been eating Imperial rations for months. One decent meal is never just one meal with Slaanesh. It's one meal, then another. Then the need for greater sensation, then depravity you can't imagine because you haven't been corrupted yet to comprehend it. Vorden's augmetic eye whirred, analyzing him. What else did the invitation offer? Beerus hesitated. The invitation had shown more. Perfect rest, absolute comfort, recognition of his divine status without the Imperium's constant suspicion. It had shown him treated as a god should be treated, not as a weapon to be aimed. And underneath all of that, a whisper. You deserve better than this nightmare galaxy. I see, Vorden said quietly. The Dark Prince offers you dignity. That's particularly dangerous. Most fall to Slaanesh through obvious excess, pleasure, pain, sensation. But you're being offered something more subtle. Respect. The acknowledgement you've earned. That's how Slaanesh corrupts the proud. Then how do I refuse? Beerus's frustration mounted. The other gods tried to force me. This one is just offering what I want. By recognizing that wanting isn't the same as needing. You want recognition, good food, and respect. But you don't need them to maintain your purpose. Vorden gestured to a data slate showing recent reports. Since you arrived, you've helped save Metallica, resisted Tzeentch's manipulation, and banished a demon prince that killed thousands of Imperial soldiers. Those actions have meaning regardless of whether anyone treats you with appropriate reverence. Meaning to who? The Imperium that sees me as a weapon? The Emperor who wants to use me? Beerus's tail lashed. I'm a god, Vorden, not a tool. In this galaxy, even gods are tools. The Emperor is a tool keeping the Astronomicon lit. The Chaos Gods are tools for each other's games. Nothing exists purely for itself here. Everything serves some purpose in the eternal war. Her expression softened slightly. But perhaps that's what makes resistance meaningful. Choosing purpose despite having none assigned to you. Before Beerus could respond, reality rippled. The sanctum's walls dissolved into impossible beauty, crystalline architecture that hurt to perceive, colors that existed beyond normal spectrum, and standing at the center of this perfection, a figure of absolute aesthetic magnificence. Slaanesh had come personally. The Dark Prince defied singular description, simultaneously masculine and feminine, beautiful and terrible, perfect in ways that made mortal concepts of attraction seem crude. Its presence radiated sensation itself, every possible experience compressed into a single being. Even Beerus, a god immune to mortal desires, felt the pull. Sweet little godling. Slaanesh's voice was music and screaming pleasure combined. You've been so rude to my siblings, rejecting Khorne's strength, Tzeentch's knowledge, Nurgle's peace. So I thought, why not offer something they cannot? True satisfaction. I don't want anything you're offering, Beerus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Liar. Slaanesh smiled, and the expression was simultaneously beautiful and horrifying. You want to be treated as a god rather than a curiosity. You want food that satisfies your refined palate. You want to return home and resume your proper role. I offer all of this and more. Perfection of sensation, acknowledgement of your divine nature, and the path home you've been seeking. The path home? Beerus's attention sharpened despite himself. Of course, the warp connects all realities if one knows how to navigate it. I could show you the way back to Universe 7, not through corruption or servitude, but simply because it would please me to see you achieve your desire. Slaanesh gestured, and a portal appeared, showing glimpses of Beerus's home universe. All I ask is that you first experience the perfection I can offer. One feast, one moment of true satisfaction, and then you're free to leave. Is that so unreasonable? It wasn't. That was the trap. Reasonable requests leading to corruption through incremental compromise. Beerus had learned enough from the Grey Knights to recognize the pattern. Yet knowing the trap and resisting it were different things. Why? Beerus asked. Why offer me a way home? How does that serve you? Because your presence here amuses me, but your frustration with this galaxy's rules even more so. Slaanesh laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You're a god playing mortal soldier, constraining your nature, fighting by rules you despise. Watching you struggle is entertaining, but watching you achieve satisfaction and then choose to stay, knowing you could leave but preferring to remain in service, that would be exquisite. I would never serve you. Service is such an ugly word. I prefer appreciation. You'd appreciate the perfection I offer, and in that appreciation your soul would naturally align with mine. No force, no demands, just the inevitable gravitation toward what satisfies most. The Dark Prince extended a hand. One feast, little god. Just one. Prove to yourself you can experience perfection without corruption, unless you're afraid. Pride warred with caution. Beerus had faced the other three gods and resisted. Was he really so weak he couldn't handle one meal? Was his will so fragile that simple food would break him? Then he remembered something Whis had said long ago. Lord Beerus. The difference between confidence and arrogance is knowing when to decline a challenge you don't need to accept. No, Beerus said simply. I don't need to prove anything to you or to myself. You're offering me things I want, but wanting isn't the same as needing. I want good food, but I don't need it to maintain my purpose. I want recognition, but I don't need it to know my own worth. and I want to go home, but I won't compromise myself to get there faster." Slanesh's perfect expression showed surprise, genuine, unscripted surprise that someone had seen through to the core manipulation. Remarkable. You understand the trap, yet you're still tempted. That takes unusual willpower. Or unusual stubbornness. Beerus's purple aura flared, divine ki pushing back against Slanesh's presence. "I've existed for millions of years. I've faced countless temptations, challenges, and beings who thought they could manipulate me. You're just another one. Beautiful, certainly. Powerful, obviously. But still just another obstacle between me and my purpose. And what is your purpose here, little god? In this galaxy that doesn't want you, fighting wars you can't permanently win, serving masters who see you as a weapon." Slanesh's tone remained seductive despite the rejection. "To survive with my identity intact, to learn this dimension's rules without being consumed by them, and to find my own way home without owing debts to chaos gods who collect payment in souls." Beerus met Slanesh's gaze without flinching. "That's purpose enough." The Dark Prince studied him for a long moment, then laughed, not mockingly but with genuine appreciation. "Very well. You've resisted all four of us, which makes you either extraordinarily strong-willed or extraordinarily lucky. But know this, sweet godling, we are patient. We are eternal. And every soul that resists us eventually makes one small compromise, then another, until they wake up wondering how they became what they swore they'd never be. Then I'll just have to never wake up," Beerus said flatly. Slanesh's presence withdrew, reality snapping back to the sanctum's familiar walls. Vorden stood exactly where she'd been, though she was breathing hard, covered in sweat from enduring Slanesh's presence, even peripherally. "You actually refused," she said, disbelief evident. "You faced all four chaos gods and refused each one. That's..." She couldn't find words. In 10,000 years of Imperial history, almost no one had accomplished that. Not Space Marines, not Primarchs, not even the Emperor had remained completely uncorrupted. He'd simply been strong enough to resist better than anyone else. "I'm stubborn," Beerus said tiredly. The effort of resisting had been immense, more exhausting than any physical battle. "And I have something the Imperium doesn't understand. I genuinely believe in my own purpose. Not borrowed faith, not duty to others, but absolute certainty about what I am and what I do. That's harder to corrupt than anything else." "Then perhaps," Vorden said slowly, "you can teach us something after all." The Great Rift had stabilized but not closed, its wound across the galaxy still bleeding warp energy into real space. Guilliman had called for a massive coordinated strike. The Indomitus Crusade would assault key chaos strongholds while the Rift remained navigable, pushing back the forces of the ruinous powers before they could consolidate their gains. It was humanity's desperate gambit. Hurt chaos badly enough to buy centuries of breathing room. Beerus had been assigned to the most dangerous assault, the Vengeful Spirit's resting place. The Vengeful Spirit had been Horus's flagship during the Heresy, a massive battleship now transformed into a demon-infested fortress orbiting a dead world near the Eye of Terror. Abaddon the Despoiler used it as a staging ground for Black Crusades, and within its corrupted halls, all four Chaos gods maintained presence. It was, effectively, Chaos's embassy to real space. Destroying it wouldn't defeat Chaos. Nothing could truly defeat Chaos, but it would disrupt their coordination and force them to rebuild infrastructure that had existed for 10,000 years. Temporary victory, but meaningful. Beerus stood on the bridge of a Grey Knight's strike cruiser alongside Grand Master Drago, Inquisitor Vorden, Captain General Valorous of the Custodes, and a full brotherhood of demon-hunting space marines. The combined force represented the Imperium's finest. warriors who'd spent lifetimes fighting chaos and surviving. "Our objective is the ship's bridge," Drago explained, indicating the tactical display. "Destroy it and the vengeful spirit becomes navigable. Without Abaddon's command structure, chaos forces in this sector lose coordination. We'll save billions of lives." "How many defenders?" Beerus asked. "Thousands of Chaos Space Marines, tens of thousands of cultists, and unlimited demons. The ship exists partially in the warp. Demons manifest constantly, sustained by the ambient corruption." Valoris's golden armor gleamed. "This is a suicide mission for any normal force. We expect 90% casualties." "Cheerful," Beerus muttered. "And if we fail?" "Then chaos gains momentum, the Great Rift expands further, and the Immaterium loses sectors we can't afford to abandon. So we don't fail." Drago's certainty was absolute. They boarded via teleportarium, ancient technology that transported matter through the warp itself, risking demonic manifestation with every use. Beerus felt reality twist as they materialized inside the vengeful spirit's corrupted halls, immediately assaulted by all four flavors of chaos simultaneously. Cornate berserkers charged with chain axes screaming. Zientian sorcerers hurled warp fire. Nurglite plague marines shambled forward with diseased resilience. Slaaneshi noise marines attacked with sonic weapons that turned sound into agony. And above it all, demons of every variety manifested from walls that bled reality. The Grey Knights met them with absolute faith and blessed bolter fire. The Custodians fought with transhuman skill refined over 10,000 years. Inquisitor Vorden coordinated fire teams with tactical precision, and Beerus unleashed everything he'd learned. He denied Cornati diamonds through rejection of rage. He countered Tzeentchian sorcery with absolute certainty in his own reality. He resisted Nurglite corruption through refusal to accept entropy. He ignored Slaaneshi temptation with pride in his own purpose. And through it all, he destroyed, not feeding chaos through mindless violence, but applying destruction with surgical precision that erased threats without empowering them. He'd become something unique in this galaxy, a god of destruction who fought chaos without becoming its tool. They carved through the ship's interior, each chamber harder than the last. Chaos Space Marines fell to combined fire. Demons were banished through faith and blade. Cultists died screaming prayers to gods who didn't care about individual mortality. The casualties mounted. Grey Knights fell despite their armor. Custodians bled despite their transhuman physiology, and Vorden's retinue was reduced to a handful of survivors. But they reached the bridge. Abaddon the Despoiler waited for them there, War Master of Chaos, the Emperor's greatest failure, and the being who'd broken Cadia. His Talon of Horus, a lightning claw that had killed a Primarch, crackled with malevolent power. His armor, forged from the essence of defeated champions, radiated authority, and his eyes carried 10,000 years of war and hatred. "So," Abaddon said, his voice like grinding continents, "the foreign god finally faces real power. The four have told me about you, the stubborn little godling who refuses to kneel. Let's see if your will survives meeting someone who serves chaos willingly." He attacked with speed that defied his massive armor. Beerus met him head-on, divine ki clashing with chaos-empowered might. The bridge shook with their impact. Custodians and Grey Knights engaged Abaddon's elite bodyguard, chosen warriors blessed by all four gods simultaneously. Beerus had fought universe-destroying threats before, but Abaddon was different. This wasn't raw power. It was 10 millennia of experience fighting gods, primarchs, and anything that opposed chaos. Every move was calculated, every strike designed to test defenses and exploit weaknesses. "You fight well for an outsider," Abaddon acknowledged, his talons scraping against Beerus's energy barrier. "But you're still just passing through. I've been waging this war longer than your entire civilization. You're a curiosity. I'm inevitable." "Inevitable?" Beerus caught the talon mid-strike. "That's what Nurgle said. That's what they all say. But I'm still here, uncorrupted, and you're about to lose your flagship." He channeled Hakai directly into Abaddon's armor, not trying to kill the War Master. That would just send him back to the warp to resurrect, but to destroy the vengeful spirit's bridge controls. The ancient mechanisms exploded in purple light, their corrupted machine spirits erased from existence. The ship shuddered. Without command systems, it began drifting, its position in real space destabilizing. Demonic manifestations flickered as the boundary between Immaterium and warp became uncertain. "Clever," Abaddon admitted, "but insufficient. This ship has been my home for 10,000 years. It won't fall to one god's tantrum." "No," Drago said, appearing beside Beerus with his brotherhood. "But it will fall to coordinated assault." The Grey Knights unleashed a combined psychic strike, the rite of final banishment, designed to sever warp connections and force manifestations back into the Immaterium. Combined with Beerus's destruction of the physical anchors, it created a cascade effect. The vengeful spirit screamed. Not metaphorically, the ship itself, corrupted into semi-sentience, wailed as its connection to the warp was severed. Demons discorporated in waves. Chaos Space Marines found their blessings fading. Even Abaddon's armor flickered. "Retreat," the War Master commanded his remaining forces. "This battle is lost, but the war continues." He escaped through a warp portal, his elite guard following. The remaining Chaos forces collapsed without leadership, fleeing into the ship's depths. The Imperium had won, temporarily. They evacuated as the vengeful spirit broke apart, its structure no longer sustained by warp energy. From orbit, Beerus watched humanity's greatest enemy lose its primary stronghold, a victory measured in centuries of disruption, billions of lives saved, and a message sent to chaos that resistance was still possible. "Well done," Guilliman's voice came through Vox from the fleet flagship. "You've proven yourself, Beerus, not as a weapon to be aimed, but as an ally who fights by choice. That matters more than you know." Beerus didn't respond immediately. He'd come to this nightmare galaxy seeking only a way home. Instead, he'd found a war that would never end, enemies that couldn't be permanently defeated, and allies who fought despite knowing victory was temporary. And somehow, he'd chosen to keep fighting anyway. Months had passed since the vengeful spirit's fall. Beerus remained in the Warhammer 40k universe, still seeking a way home, but no longer as desperately. He'd found something unexpected in this nightmare galaxy. Not comfort or satisfaction, but purpose that existed outside his original role as God of Destruction. He worked alongside the Grey Knights now, hunting greater demons across sectors. He developed techniques that combined Hakai with imperial demon-banishing methods, creating hybrid approaches that worked where either method alone would fail. The Ordo Malleus had classified him as Sanctioned Xenos Entity, Extreme Threat Level, Provisional Ally, which was apparently the closest the Inquisition came to friendship. On Terra, in a private audience chamber, the Emperor's presence touched Beerus's mind one final time. "You have done well, little god. You resisted chaos, adapted to our dimension's rules, and fought beside humanity despite having no obligation to do so. That is admirable." "I'm still leaving when I find a way home," Beerus replied. "This alliance is temporary." "All alliances in this galaxy are temporary. That makes them no less meaningful." The Emperor's tone carried something approaching warmth. "But know this, you have changed the Imperium simply by existing within it. You proved that chaos can be resisted through absolute conviction in one's own purpose. That lesson will echo long after you depart. Beerus stood on a Grey Knight's strike cruiser, looking out at the Great Rift's scar across the galaxy. Somewhere beyond that wound, 4 chaos gods waited. They'd tried to corrupt him through strength, knowledge, despair, and perfection. All had failed because Beerus had maintained absolute certainty about one thing. He was a god of destruction who chose what to destroy and when. In Universe 7, that purpose had been clear and uncomplicated. Here, it had become something more nuanced. Destruction applied with precision, denial wielded alongside obliteration, and power tempered by understanding that some wars couldn't be won, only fought. Lord Beerus, Inquisitor Vorden approached, carrying a data slate. We've received reports of a demon prince manifestation in the Ultima Segmentum. Brother Captain Ervax requests your assistance. Beerus's tail swished, anticipation rather than irritation. Tell him I'm on my way. And Vorden, make sure there's better food at the destination this time. I'm not eating nutrient paste again. She smiled slightly. I'll see what I can requisition from the local planetary governor. As the ship entered the warp for transit, Beerus felt the Chaos God's distant attention, always watching, always waiting for him to make one mistake, one compromise. But he also felt something else, the Emperor's light in the warp, the Grey Knight's absolute faith, and his own unshakable conviction. He was Beerus, god of destruction. He'd been pulled into a nightmare galaxy where gods were parasites and victory was temporary. He'd resisted corruption from beings that had broken Primarchs and shattered empires. And he'd discovered that sometimes the greatest act of destruction was refusing to be destroyed by impossible circumstances. The war would continue. Chaos would never be truly defeated. The Immaterium would keep sacrificing billions to save trillions. And somewhere in the midst of that endless horror, a purple-furred god who'd once destroyed planets for fun had found meaning fighting alongside mortals who refused to surrender despite knowing they'd never truly win. It was absurd, it was grimdark, it was pointless in the grand scheme of things, and Beerus had decided it mattered anyway. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. More stories await.